Hugo was glad school was over. He could not stop thinking about Kiera the entire day. It was weird. He had only really talked to her yesterday, but he felt like he had known her for years. She was kind and helpful. Of course, the most prominent reason was because she was a ghost. Although that somehow was just a tiny thought in the back of his head. As soon as the bell rang, he raced to the door and towards his locker. He grabbed the books he needed and was about to close his locker when a hand grabbed the door of the locker. Hugo looked at the hand and then up to the person's face. It was his coach. "Impromptu training session. Come on," his coach said, grabbing his wrist and dragging Hugo with him. "Wait, coach, I have to be somewhere now." Hugo tried to get out of the coach's grip, but he just would not budge. He could not be taken now. He had to go to Kiera. He promised her he would be there right after school. "I don't care," his coach said as they reached the locker rooms. "Training takes priority over everything." Hugo rolled his eyes and wanted nothing more than to smack his coach on the head. He sometimes really hated the man. He did not care about any other activities the team might have and just ordered to train. Some tried to leave, but only got penalties and had to stay longer. That did not stop Hugo, though. He tried his best to sneak out multiple times, but the coach caught him every time and added more things to his training. Hugo wanted to scream. He did not want to be here. He had promised Kiera he would be there, but it was already starting to get dark. Hugo just quickly finished his training, being the last one of the team on the field. As he was finally done with his last lap, before the coach could give him pointers, he sprinted towards the locker rooms. His coach wanted to follow him, but Hugo was somehow even faster than in the training earlier. Hugo didn't bother taking a shower or putting on his normal clothes. He just grabbed his backpack with all of his stuff and ran out of the room. He sprinted towards the old building and only stopped when he was in the study hall, leaning on his knees and panting. His legs were shaking from all the running, but he ignored it. Hugo straightened up and immediately froze in place. There she was, but it was different. Kiera was in the middle of the room. The white mist that had covered her body was now replaced by pitch black. Her back was turned to him, but he could tell something was really not good. The room was dark and colder than before. He could see his own breath as it still came out in pants. Yet it was the middle of summer. "Kiera?" His teeth clattered together as he wrapped his arms around himself. His short-sleeved shirt and shorts clinging to his body with sweat. It felt like he was engulfed in ice. Kiera suddenly turned around. Hugo's breath hitched in his throat. Gone was the sweet smile and soft look. Her eyes were black, a white pupil in the middle. Her mouth was stretched into a black smile that almost reached her ears. Her hair was as dark as her eyes and floating upwards. Her face was white, a scary white. "Hugo," low. Her voice was sharp and low. A shiver racked through his entire body, and he was now shaking from the cold. Hugo blinked and she was suddenly inches away from his face. Hugo wanted to move, but he was frozen to the ground. He was terrified. Her hand reached towards his face. It was black and her nails were like claws. "You lied to me," she whispered, laying her hand on his cheek. He flinched. It felt like his skin was burning off. I didn't mean to." Kiera tilted her head, tracing a sharp nail over his cheekbone, creating a small cut that started to bleed. Hugo ignored it. "My coach, he grabbed me and forced me to practice. His eyes were pleading with her, begging her to come back to her senses, to believe him. Kiera got even closer to him and licked at the cut she made. Hugo shivered, willing himself to keep his head high. Kiera hummed as she tasted his blood. "Please, Kiera," Hugo tried again, raising his hand and placing it on her cheek. Her skin was so cold. It took everything he had in him not to recoil. "Come back," he whispered. Kiera blinked, one of her eyes turning back to the green-blue color he wanted to see. Hugo knew he was getting to her, but he needed to make sure she would become her normal self again. His other hand went to her cheek, and he softly pulled her head down and kissed her forehead. Kiera gasped, and in a white flash, she was herself again, the white mist covering her once more, her eyes and mouth back to normal, although her lower lip was quivering. Tears were streaming down her face. "You jerk!" she gasped out and hit his chest. Hugo could feel the air getting knocked out of him, but that didn't stop him from embracing her. Even though he held her close, Kiera didn't stop hitting him. "You said you would be here. You promised. You..." Her voice cracked and a sob came out. She hit him one more time and relaxed against his hold, her head on his chest. "I'm sorry, Kiera. As soon as the bell rung, I sprinted to my locker, but I was stopped by my coach. He forced an impromptu practice of football, and no matter how hard I tried to escape, he would hold me back and make me do more training." Hugo sighed. "I was so angry, and I'm so sorry." He released her waist, but Kiera didn't let go of his shirt. Hugo kneeled down, and she let go in surprise. He bowed his head and gripped his own thighs. "I will do anything to make it up to you." His voice was strong and confident. Kiera sniffed and also kneeled down. As she was about to stroke his head, Hugo spoke again. "Please, just..." He looked up at her. "Never do something like that again. Please." He looked like he was in pain and she gasped. Her hand went to his cheek and she softly caressed the cut she made. "I don't know what happened. I have never felt so betrayed like that. I didn't know I could do that. But you hurt me." Her eyes turned black again. Kiera shook her head and her pupils came back. "You also have to promise me to never betray me like that again. If you want to continue being my friend after that." She mumbled the last part, her hand retracting. Hugo smiled softly. He grabbed her hand and kissed the back of it. Kiera immediately turned red and she squeaked. "I was scared, I'll admit." He softly rubbed his thumb on the back of her hand. "But I was also at fault. I could not stop thinking about you today. It was like you were always there, so yes." He locked eyes with her. "I still want to be your friend." Kiera sniffled again and launched herself at Hugo, embracing him tightly. He returned the hug, and the two sat there on the ground for who knows how long, just enjoying each other's presence.